Peter.
What's happening, brother? Here we are again on Tuesday night at our watering hole.
Yeah, well, welcome to the Ten-Four Tavern.
Good to be
How's
here.
it going?
Good, man. I'm excited. I'm super stoked for tonight's episode.
Well, we got one heck of a guest, so really excited to hear it. A lot of really incredible stuff, things that are unbelievable. So when we bring Derek in, I'll let you introduce him. You guys are really good friends, so I'm going to pass it over to you. But as long as we're ready to go, if anything else, if there any house cleaning, let's bring Derek in. You good?
Yeah, we're good. I'll tell you something about Derek. You know, I met Derek when I was a detective in the homicide squad. We were working this RICO case, and he came in because we were working with DEA, and he just he impressed me, man. He's a leader who said all the right things, but we've seen plenty of those people. And another meeting with Derek later on, same thing, man. This guy came in and just said amazing things. It really made you want to follow him. Then Derek left New York, and I stayed in New York and worked with DEA quite a bit. And even though Derek was gone and nobody gained anything by saying nice things about him, anytime Derek's name would be mentioned in the DEA office space, people lit up. And I'm talking about like some really good investigators, like, you know, Billy Relott, first grade detective from Red Rum, Steve Palermo, Sergeant Patty Keene, countless DEA agents. You know, and then I lost touch with Derek for a while. And then I came to ATF headquarters in 2018. And I would talk to people who were dealing with DEA's Special Operations Division, ATF folks, and they couldn't say enough good things about Derek. So here's a guy who, you know, you go to DEA office space in New York now, or SOD space, and you mention his name, people light up because he left behind a legacy. And you know, you don't meet too many leaders in our business that do that. Even the good ones, you know, they're great during their time, and when they leave, they're somewhat forgotten. Here's a guy who made a tremendous impact on the law enforcement profession and continues to make a tremendous impact in keeping people safe in his retirement. So I mean, just an inspiring guy. So I'm honored to have him on, and yeah, even more honored that he's a good friend of mine.
All right, well, let's bring Derek into the tavern, and then we'll welcome all our viewers and guests, and let's kick it off.
Brother,
how are
Derek,
you?
welcome to Ten-Four Tavern.
How you guys doing tonight? What a great night to be on a podcast with you two former law enforcement professionals who served this country, served the city of New York in the greatest police department in America. And I'm just so happy to be here tonight with you guys.
Thank you. Well, listen, welcome to all our guest viewers. We've done real good in our first two episodes. This is episode 3. So we'll see how we do tonight, but we've got good feedback. Talk to the folks at the Finest Unfiltered. Things are going great. And what we're trying to do here is a couple of old lawmen, bring in some lawmen friends and guests and colleagues that we've met over the years and talk about some old times, talk about current issues, and just bring some awareness so that we can help elevate people's awareness of things that are going on in the world so they can make conscious decisions and not be living in a vacuum or a cocoon, because there's so much, including one topic tonight that I was completely ignorant of. I knew something was happening, but I didn't know the level of detail. And when Derek said he was going to come on and we talk about the crops that are growing this cannabis, illegal cannabis grow houses in rural America, specifically we'll focus about Maine tonight, I am blown away. So I really feel that not only are we going to kick it and have some fun and a cocktail, but really raise some serious awareness. So Pete, I'm going to kick it to you, let you introduce Derek.
Well, yeah, like I mentioned, Derek, I mean, I'm damn proud to know you. I know, you know, our families are friends. You know, we reconnected when I moved back to Virginia. You've been down here for a while. But, I mean, you've done amazing work at DEA, and then you went out into the private sector, did some really interesting stuff. One of the things that blew my mind is how much of your heart and soul you put into helping the families of people who died as a result of fentanyl poisoning. So, I mean, you know, I just, like I said, man, honored to know you. And I just want to hear more. Like I said, I mean, you and I talk a lot. We talk about other things, but to hear, you know, the things that you've learned, especially with the Chinese declaring war, in essence, on our country with precursor chemicals and the other things that are going on, I think folks would be really interested to hear what you have to say. You know, I learn something new from you every day. So I'm looking forward to rocking and rolling tonight.
Pete, Tommy, thank you so much. I look forward to the conversation. The one thing I want to start off to say is that it's a visual that I use a lot because I want to make it clear. It's all about America. It's not a red or a blue issue. It's a red, white, and blue issue. So the topics that we're going to discuss tonight have nothing to do with politics. They have to do with Americans that are dying at record levels. And we have our adversaries around the world that are attacking our country. And that's why behind me, you could see the volume of dead Americans from the poisoning of our country. So, yeah, I'm very passionate about this. And I've been doing this about, let's say, 8 years now. And it's been like a calling for me because, look, when you retire from the jobs that we all worked in, we had a mission. Every day we woke up trying to keep Americans safe. But when you retire, right, some of us want to give back, and we want to be able to educate the public, and we want to be able to support these families that are out there selflessly trying to raise awareness about fentanyl poisoning. But what I'm going to say right off the bat, what really pissed me off in talking to so many families over the last several years is that the vast majority of Americans that lost their kids never even heard about fentanyl. Yeah. So the U.S. government, and we're not here to, blame any one administration, the U.S. government failed our citizens by not warning them about fentanyl poisoning, about synthetic drug poisonings, and we can go over that in detail. We started to see this way back when I was the head of DEA Special Operations Division. But we'll go through it in a chronology. But I really appreciate you guys. This is a great podcast. I love law enforcement. I love talking to warriors like you guys. I mean, Pete, you're a hero in my mind. You went out there on 9/11 and, you almost died from the 9/11 cancer, okay? And this is the problem. Like, people forget what law enforcement does to the citizens of this country. So I'm very excited to be here tonight.
Oh, thanks, brother. Honored to have you. One thing we all have in common is that we're all New Yorkers, and I know some of our listeners probably aren't from New York.
That's right.
So can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and where you went to
school?
Well,
before we do that, Pete, can we bring? Oh,
yeah, absolutely.
What are we drinking tonight? And by the way, everybody who's listening and watching, please share what you're cocktailing tonight. So, Pete, why don't you start it off? What are you drinking tonight?
Well, I blew out my shoulder on Saturday and went to the emergency room and learned about the miracle of methylprednisone. Because my shoulder, I couldn't even move it Saturday. Today, I have full mobility. So in honor of my blown out shoulder, I'm drinking Monkey Shoulder Scotch whiskey. Cheers.
All right. Derek, what do you got? I hear you got a tequila and soda.
Tequila and soda right here in the DEA mug.
Any particular brand, or you just take it as it goes?
You know what? At this point, whatever it is, Casamigos, Don Julio, whatever I got available in the house.
All right. Speed rack for you, Derek. Top shelf for Pete. He's a big shot, I am drinking Del Maguey Vida Mezcal tonight. So cheers to you guys.
Cheers.
Cheers, buddy.
Thanks for coming. I figured I would pick the mezcal for the Cartels tonight, and then you come and show up with tequila, Derek. So we're on the same page. It's all good.
I'm the thing, but one of these things is not like the other. Tonight, that's me.
Yeah. So all right. So Pete asked the question. Let's talk about where it all started back in New York, and to the point where you feel comfortable, Derek, and sharing what happened and how you end up in the DEA.
So long story short, my father was a 30-year veteran of DEA. He retired as the chief of the New York Drug Enforcement Task Force. Not to brag about my father, but he was a legend. I mean, he has a gym named after him in New York City DEA, the John Maltz Fitness Center. He also has a leadership award named after him in the Federal Law Enforcement Foundation annual awards, the John Maltz Leadership Award. But he also was crazy, obsessive with law and order and going after bad guys and supporting his folks. But so my father, when I was like, a lot of people don't know this, and I want to share it because you guys can relate to it. So back in 1972, there was a undercover deal in a hotel in New York that went bad. Tommy Devine, a DEA agent, was in an operation. It was an undercover deal. They flashed the money. The bad guys saw the money. The bad guys came, and basically they started shooting up in the hotel room. Tommy Devine was shot in the back. He had a bullet in his back. He was brought to the hospital. He was paralyzed for about 10 years. He was in a rehabilitation center. And my father took me to the actual facility when I was 9 years old. I had no idea what was going on, but all I know is this DEA agent was sitting in a bed, couldn't move, and I was told he had a bullet in his back. And then a few years later, the old man is taking me on surveillance, and 13 years old, following a female into a building in Far Rockaway, following the female up to the 11th floor in the elevator to try to get the location because my father and the task force was trying to find this fugitive. Bottom line is, he was insane, and he put me in a situation where obviously it's in my DNA. But flash forward, right? When I was in college, I got a call from the old man, and he actually had my application filled out for DEA. He said, "Hey, sign this thing for DEA." I'm like, what? I'm an accounting major at Syracuse University. So I signed the thing, and then I got a call about the interview. He had an agent come pick me up, bring me to the interview. I went through the interview process, and I was hired as a 22-year-old kid right out of college. Because back in the old days, you could pull some strings, right? We all know about that. And that stuff has changed. But I'm so thankful that he pushed me into this career path because I had no idea. Like most kids, they don't know what they want to do. But because of my father, I was able to have 28 years in the DEA. It was the greatest career I could ever dreamed of. I had no idea what I was getting into. But the cool part is that ultimately, when I worked my way up, I took over the chief of the task force job and sat in the old man's office. So that was kind of cool. But, so bottom line is my father influenced me. It was a great career. I met so many spectacular people. And so I'm very, very happy to speak about that.
So we'll talk about the years if it's okay, but let's fast forward to 2025. And I'm going to pull this up. And this is a quote that was put out all over the media. And I think it really tells everyone exactly who you are without mincing any words. I will work daily with my outstanding law enforcement partners to help build an army of good to defeat the evil. These criminals are responsible for killing Americans at record levels with poisonous substances and for terrorizing communities around the country must be held accountable. Derek S. Maltz, acting DEA administrator, January 20th, 2025. So we've fast forwarded from your entry to here. This is where you are, 2025. You held the fort down for the administration. True American hero, patriot, and that I think amplifies everything that you're all about.
So Tommy, thank you. I mean, I was very clear in my vision when I came to DEA. As you see, I was wearing a tie that was American red, white, and blue tie. And I made it clear to everybody in DEA that this wasn't about DEA. I don't want to ever hear about DEA. I want to hear about how we're going to work together to fight the evil destroying our country. And I made it really clear with the symbol of the tie. And I know it sounds corny, but I had an all-hands meeting on day 2, 8,000 or 9,000 people on the call. And I made the message really clear that I did not want to ever hear about DEA unilateral operations. We're in the middle of an unrestricted war with China, and the cartels are killing our citizens at record levels. It was imperative to me that we work together and we use all these American patriots with all the capabilities and the authorities to go after the threat because the threat's growing. Now, just on a side note, I just thought of this just now. I want you to see this visual that I made before I left the DEA 10 years ago. In 2014, I made this visual to show the red line shows the complexity of the threat to Americans, all Americans. And the green line shows the ability to deal with the threats, and the gap between good and evil is growing. So for anybody that has kids, grandkids, nephews, nieces, friends' kids, this is impacting all of us. So it was imperative to me because, by the way, that gap hasn't been reduced. It's actually growing for a lot of reasons we could talk about. But the bottom line is we have to work as one team. We've always heard that shit. And when I was in 9/11 at the Special Operations Division and I saw complete dysfunction between the intel community and the law enforcement agencies, that made me sick. And then, of course, in 2003, when my brother died in Afghanistan fighting for the country and came back in a body bag, that made me even more focused when I came back to run the Special Operations Division in 2005. You have to have a sense of urgency. You have to work with everybody, especially the state and locals, because they had so much intelligence. And so, it's been a good ride, but the thing is, it's also been frustrating in many ways, because for my entire job at SOD, Special Operations Division, we talked about a whole of government approach. The problem is we couldn't get the leaders in the interagency to work together because everyone's looking out for their own little, kingdoms, right? The silos are up, the walls were up. Meanwhile, we got Americans dying at record levels. Remember, the cartels deal in death, but law enforcement fights for life every day. And it doesn't matter if you're NYPD, you're LA sheriff, we're all in this together. So the bottom line is, what the hell's going on? We need leaders to step up and unite law enforcement, not divide law enforcement. And that pissed me off for many years.
Yeah. Hey, Derek, I heard a statistic today that blew my mind. I heard that in the last 5 years, as a result of fentanyl poisonings, and I agree they're poisonings, we lost more people, 5 years, than in 7 decades of war.
So, Pete, all of that stuff is accurate. The sad part is, and I'm yelling because I get pissed off, somebody needs to hold the CDC accountable because their statistics are inaccurate, they're outdated, they're not timely, and the parents around America are pissed off because during COVID, every night on the TV, COVID deaths, COVID, cases. We can't even get an accurate accounting. So I'm really upset about that. But Pete, just to give you an idea, this is just one organization, Lost Voices of Fentanyl, which you know very well because you came out to the rally. They can't even keep up with the collages of dead kids. So you would think, right? You would think that any American that looks at this teenage slide would say, holy shit, the teenagers are being deceived to death. But then you would think with these infant slides that I've been making lately, that people would say, holy shit, it's not just drug users, it's a poisoning of our country. So it's very frustrating. We don't know how many Americans have died from fentanyl because our government has failed the taxpayer. They haven't taken it serious because of the stigma of drug use. So they basically looked at these deaths as, you know what, Pete Fratelli, he should have known better. He shouldn't have taken drugs. We don't give a crap. But no, it's another adversary, the Chinese Communist Party, that are trying to destabilize America using poison substances. And they're actually very effective. Sadly, I could say that they've been very effective. Without dropping a bomb, without coming into the country and shooting up cities, they're doing it very strategically. They're using their brain. But the American government over many years has failed all these families, all these communities. So it's really sad.
Can you, I agree with you. And a lot of people say, hey, man, some drug user died an overdose, and who cares? Which is not the case here. But can you just quickly touch on the case that happened recently up in New York that Frank Tarantino told me about? And that was the death of a baby who was in a daycare center that was apparently being used as a drug mill at night. Talk about a victim, pure victim.
So here it is. This 1-year-old beautiful Dominican baby was dropped off by his mother to the daycare center in New York. Unfortunately, and by the way, look at this beautiful mom and her baby, right? So anyone in America looking at this should be able to relate to this tragedy. Okay, now, here's where it gets crazy. And a lot of people don't notice. When the baby and 3 other infants went down in that daycare center, the manager, the director, whatever the hell her title was, that was running the daycare center in the Bronx, instead of her calling 911, she called the husband. I don't know if you could see this, but the Ring camera got the husband coming and picking up the additional fentanyl in the daycare center. She did this before she called 911. Those kids, 3 of the kids were saved by Narcan. The baby, the Dominican boy, Nicholas, he died. Now, what my point of telling you that is that this is the kind of people. So fortunately, because of good law enforcement work, NYPD, DEA, other agencies they tracked the guy into Sinaloa, Mexico. He was on a bus. And because of good cooperation at the time, they locked the guy up in a few weeks after the incident. And now that guy and the director of the daycare center was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. So justice was served. But unfortunately, Pete, as a result of that incident, I had to then create these, infant collages, right? Now, check this out. And anybody in this place, in this room here, that has kids or grandkids, I get this message on Facebook. Mr. Derek Maltz, my name's Corinne Frosting. I lost my granddaughter Charlotte to fentanyl poisoning on May 9, 2022. I haven't been able to speak or advocate before because of the trial, because her son and daughter-in-law is in prison because they had fentanyl in the bed. I'd love to have my sweet Charlotte added, 15-month-old Charlotte, to your collages. So as a result of that, unfortunately, I had to make another one with the babies, right? And there's little beautiful Charlotte. And the grandma was so appreciative, but this is not the America that we have grown up in. This is third world country nonsense. So there's plenty of blame to go around. We're not going to blame any president or administration. But right now, it's imperative that we work together to go after the elements that are doing this business, because we have to save our future generation. We have record levels of young Americans that are dying. We have record levels of infants that are dying. Military members are dying at record levels. Celebrities, professional athletes, Olympic athletes. I collect all of this stuff and I keep records of this stuff because it blows me away that America is not paying attention to this crisis. Like they're completely dismissing it as that someone else's problem. But you got to remember, Pete and Tommy, after COVID, America, the depression and anxiety has gone off the charts. You can't get mental illness support anymore. We all have some level of mental illness. I mean, look at me. I'm freaking screaming and yelling on your podcast. So, we all have it in our genes. But when these kids today are isolated, during COVID, they're sitting at home. They're on the media, social media all day long. They go and they order pills on one of these social media sites. The drug dealer delivers it to the house. They pop a pill. Then the parents find them dead. The parents say, how the hell did my beautiful baby die from this like substance? What is going on here? Because the country's not being educated on this crisis. And it's the worst we've ever seen. It's not grandpa's opioid crisis. It's not about some doctor overprescribing, some type of opioid. That happened many years ago. And it's not really happening anymore like it was. Now, unfortunately, the government, the way they react to this stuff now, if you have a car accident, Pete, and you want oxycodone because you're in dying pain, there's doctors out there that won't even give you the prescription because they don't want you to get addicted. So then you go out on the internet and you buy something and the illicit drug supply is totally tainted. So it's a catastrophic failure of government, and these poor families are suffering across America.
Well, Derek, I know that you guys were heavily involved in the intelligence world and whatnot. And I know that, the government, I think, was also a little bit resistant to admitting that the Chinese were supplying the cartels the precursor chemicals to make fentanyl. And I know you and I spoke offline about, my concern about the vaping products and the illicit tobacco products that the Chinese push, as well. Because, I mean, if they're poisoning fentanyl, it's not that difficult to conceptualize them poisoning a vaping product. And the stuff that they sell here in the United States that comes from China is illegal to sell in China. So it just blows my mind how our country kind of turns its back to it and just kind of allows it to go on. But I see Tommy pulled up a very interesting photo of you being a very hands-on DEA leader, which does not surprise me in the least. So,
yeah. So Derek, with everything that you talked about and the travesty that's happening, why don't you take us back just a little bit for your time as the acting administrator, where you rolled up your sleeves, you got into the lab, and you really did a deep dive on trying to find out what all these chemicals and precursors are that are coming and the paths that they are.
All right, so let me just give you a little bit of a background because it's important why I wanted to go to the lab when I was the acting DEA. So let's start off by showing you $207 million in mostly $100 denominations that were actually in Mexico City and seized from a Chinese chemical broker in 2007. That's many years ago, but that's like the largest cash seizure in the history of the world on a drug case. And people don't realize that they took it from a Chinese chemical broker that was providing precursors for methamphetamine in Mexico. Now, if you look at the evolution of this crisis with the chemicals, if you remember around 2009, 2010, 11, 12, the country was getting inundated with synthetic cannabinoids, synthetic cathinones, which people know as K2 spice and bath salts. That stuff was coming out of these labs in Wuhan, China, and other places in China. And basically, it was Chinese criminal networks that were making these chemicals. They were shipping them to America. People were using this stuff, and they were selling it at bodegas all over New York City in these little bags, Scooby-Doo snacks, King Kong. People were smoking this stuff, thinking it was like marijuana or synthetic marijuana. But really, it was poisonous substances from these dirty, filthy labs in China. Now, if you look back, and you could go on YouTube and search synthetic drugs, K2 spice, you'll see all kinds of psychiatric psychosis and episodes of guys climbing fences that are nude in the streets. Cops have to go and deal with these people. But the reality is it was China's first or second phase of using synthetic drugs to poison America. Now, they've been doing methamphetamine, precursors for many, many years, 40 or 50 years. I don't even know how long. So there's been a business relationship between the cartels and the Chinese chemical guys. What happens is around 2012, we started seeing a spike in deaths, specifically in the Northeast and the Southeast. And when the autopsies came back, it was fentanyl. So we did these intelligence reviews and we dealt with the field operations people, and we determined that a lot of this stuff, this fentanyl, the illicit fentanyl, was coming out of these labs in China. And there were people were ordering this stuff directly from China on the websites, okay? So we didn't really know. I didn't even know, as the head of SOD, I never even knew about illicit fentanyl. Now, let me just go back because it's important for you to notice. In 2005, there was a bunch of people that died in the Midwest, like hundreds of people. I don't remember how many. And no one knew what the hell it was. They were reporting as heroin overdoses. In fact, it wasn't heroin. It was illicit fentanyl that was made in a lab in Toluca, Mexico. In 2005, 2006, the DEA, working with Mexico, working with Chicago PD, they seized a lab in Toluca. It was the Mexican cartels really, really beefing up the production of illicit fentanyl. So that kind of went away. We didn't see that for many years. Like, no one really understood it. 2012, 13, we started seeing these deaths like this. So we went to the former Attorney General and we briefed him, Eric Holder, on what we called Operation Deadly Merchant. And we went there because we wanted to warn America that the Chinese criminal networks were now engaging with the Mexican cartels with illicit fentanyl, and we started seeing mass amounts of Americans dying. That was 10, 11 years ago. Well, in fairness to Eric Holder, no one really understood this stuff, right? Including most people in the DEA and including myself. But the problem is it just got worse because the synthetic opioids that they were producing was so powerful, the demand in America started increasing. And then they were using social media sites, and they were getting more and more American kids at a very young age the access to buy these fentanyl pills eventually when they came out. Now, let me give you a little bit of interesting information. In 2015, there was 0 fake pills that were seized in the Phoenix DEA area. In 2023, there were 42 million fake pills seized. Why is that? Because the Sinaloa cartel controlled the entire Arizona, POEs and the corridors. So they had the routes into America. And they were seizing mass amounts of these fake fentanyl. We call them like, the blue 30s and the Mexican oxy. Anyway, the bottom line is that the cartel started massive production of these fake pills. Yeah, they look like oxycodone, or they look like Vicodin, or whatever the hell opioid they were looking like, but they were all fentanyl. There was nothing real about them. So kids were getting deceived to death. Kids were going online. They were ordering what they thought was, maybe Xanax or oxycodone because they wanted to feel better, because they were dealing with all the anxiety and the depression. And unfortunately, they were dying, in many cases, like instantly. So it became a crisis. The cartels were making a bundle. I mean, we used to see pills being sold in America for $25, $45, $50 a pill. In some areas of the country, like on the Indian reservations, they were over $100 a pill. Now, of course, the price came way down as the supply was booming. But so this crisis just continued. And by the way, it hasn't stopped. So as America is trying to get caught up and to talk about fentanyl, we have the more powerful synthetic opioids now, the nitazines, etinitazines, metanitazines, protonitazines. All these very powerful synthetic opioids are being made in the Chinese labs, and they're shipping them here. And now, of course, we have carfentanil, which is like an animal tranquilizer. And that stuff is causing damage all over America right now. Most people aren't even talking about it. You have xylazine, which is the actual like medicine for animals, okay, to be able to use as a medicine to calm these animals down. And that stuff is causing necrosis of humans. It's rotten human tissue. Now, the DEA is seizing every one of their seizures. They do analysis. 30% of the powder that they're analyzing contains xylazine. The xylazine is being sold on websites in China for $1 a kilogram. Why would anybody want to put xylazine in a substance where somebody would use it when it's going to cause the rotten of your tissue? Because they want to destabilize and destroy our society. Why is in America dealing with this at a level like we've never seen before? That's the question of the day.
Well, Derek, a lot of these people think crime, right? I mean, a lot of people think some of this is victims. Oh, they're just drug abusers, or
right.
With the tobacco smuggling. Oh, well, it's tobacco. It doesn't hurt anybody. They don't realize, aside from the Chinese, there are other entities out there that profit from these illicit trades. And as you know, having supervised the Red Rum Group, there are people who prey upon those who make money in these black markets because they realize, hey, if I steal the dark money, they're not going to report it to police, which leads to homicides, home invasions, and all kinds of things.
Right. And let's not forget that, as you guys know very well, being from New York and ATF, you have like documentation for many, many years. As a matter of fact, 2007, Peter King wrote a very nice paper, which is on the internet, about how Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda are using the proceeds of illegal cigarette trafficking to fund their operations. And in these bodegas that were in New York City, run by folks from Yemen, they were sending millions and millions of dollars back to Yemen to support this radical movement, to buy missiles, to build capabilities, to go after the ships. Like we hear a lot now about Yemen and there's, the Houthis in Yemen that are shooting missiles into ships, disrupting the trade. That's because for years they've been benefiting from the proceeds of crime in America, and nobody was connecting the dots, right? I wrote papers on this. I have documents that I pushed out on the internet about the funding of terror from the bodegas, illegal operations all over America, especially New York. The problem is, as soon as people looked at this, they didn't want to investigate it because now you're picking on these Middle Eastern store owners in New York City. No, we're not picking on anybody. They're committing EBT fraud. They're selling synthetic drugs. They're doing all this criminal activity, and they're sending money to support Hezbollah and the Houthis down in Yemen. So as American citizens, you would expect that the law enforcement agencies would work together to go after that national security threat. But unfortunately, it was not happening, and they just got bigger and stronger. So, Pete, you're right. When it comes to the illicit trade and how they're making money, it's all about, making money. So the way I look at it is, it's sometimes a 2-for-1 special, right? You go to dinner tonight, you ask for a special, you and your wife get a special, you get 2-for-1, half price. In the world of bad guys, a 2-for-1 special is, if I can make billions of dollars and kill our adversary, that's what we want.
So, Derek, that's a lot, and it's really good stuff, and I would definitely want to dig into it, and it's a great, but let's go back a little bit and slow it down, because again, you got to this place as the DEA, acting administrator of the DEA. This is clearly your life's mission, but we heard how your father brought you into the DEA. You wanted to be an accountant. Frankly, my friend, I just don't see it. I don't know how that happened.
My brother was a CPA, very successful guy, and I was just trying to follow his footsteps because, like most kids, you don't know what the hell you want to do.
Of course, of course. So you're in the DEA. We got a bunch of pictures from your younger days. So why don't you walk us through a little bit of your career, where you worked, and then reference some of the pictures, because these are classic.
So basically, the bottom line is, and the most important message that I learned, and in both of these pictures, it has to do with working in a task force environment, okay? So I was first assigned to the Long Island Task Force, is where I grew up. And, I got to work with the greatest investigators from Nassau, Suffolk County PD. And of course, like the DA's offices, they had investigators, and the New York State Police, and at the time, U.S. Customs. So everything we did was in a task force. So I learned from the greatest detectives that were out there. And then the other picture with the money seizure was the stash house out there on the right. That's a detective from Nassau County PD, narcotics. And basically, Jerry McCarthy. Basically, we worked on a house that was in Great Neck, Long Island, and we waited for many, many months. Finally got the bad guys. They had like 1.4 million in cash. It was the stash house. But again, the message is, as a young agent, I built a foundation because I learned from the best and brightest, the state and locals. So I never forgot that as I grew up as a boss in DEA, because a lot of the feds, don't take this the wrong way if you're a Fed watching this, but some of these agencies, they get a little arrogant, right? They know better, they're know-it-alls. But what the state and locals taught me is, get your ass on the street, get with the informants, learn new techniques every day, because the bad guys are getting better and better. You have to stay with the times. You got to evolve with the new techniques and everything like that. And so I learned so much, and I'm so indebted to the state and locals, and specifically the detectives that helped me through my, early years in the job at Nassau, Suffolk County, and then, of course, in the New York Task Force when I was a GS, working with the finest narcotics detectives in the world from NYPD and the state police. And so I was a supervisor in there doing the South American heroin stuff. But that's how I grew up. My father told me, you have to work with all of law enforcement, but the state and locals will help you on the streets, because that's where the action is happening. It's not happening in the office. It's not happening on the computers. Get your ass on the street, learn from the best, and just build your career that way. So it was really important to work in the task forces. So I was very fortunate to have really good leaders that helped me over the years to get me, the foundation that I needed to grow.
Yep. So that really speaks to something really interesting, because, and I agree with you, in my relationship with any federal agent, and I did a DEA Trinidadian RICO with Eddie Egan. So you might know Eddie Egan from the DEA. I think we talked about that at Pete's retirement party. FBI agents, we did a bunch of RICOs and takedowns, and it was always, the way I looked at it was, we're the locals. We know who the neighborhood kids are. We know who the players are. We know the families. We have access to the databases. You bring the clout of the federal government. You bring some tools and toys, if you will. And what what I felt was it's a perfect marriage of the federal government, the locals, the knowledge, the skills, the power of the prosecution. And we're going to wait and make sure Derek is technically okay. But in the interim, okay, hold on. Let me bring him back to the screen.
Tommy,
There you go. We had a technical glitch, but we're okay.
We're good.
We're good. We're good on this side, Derek.
Well, we're waiting for Derek to come back on, man. I'll tell you, that's sage advice, you know, for
So the other side of that, I will go, and if I have to repeat it with Derek Beck gets back on with his technical glitch, is I don't even like centralized homicide units, to be honest with you. Like if you think about it, right, the way we did it in New York City, the locals carried the case and the homicide team supported the locals. And you have all of these other agencies that are like homicide is centralized and they're downtown. Like you need to be where the action is happening. That's my personal opinion. That's what I know. That's what I've grown up with. So we're talking, Derek, we're talking about, to catch you up, to go one step further on the federal, local law enforcement. I don't even like centralized homicide squads in local law enforcement because they're all downtown. You got to be out where the action is, where the neighborhood is being terrorized. And if you're not in the trenches with those people, you're downtown. You know what you're doing? You're going to lunch. You're coming in at work at 9. You're going, where are we going to lunch? Where are we going to dinner tonight? You're not even talking about those cases. But if you're localized in Bed-Stuy or in the 4-6 in South Bronx, like you're walking in and you're going, we got to go hit the streets. So I don't know, Pete, what do you think on that? And then we'll go back to Derek now that he's back.
I agree, but I'll tell you, I mean, I've seen some task force models work very well. The best investigative unit I ever worked with, hands down, and I'm not saying it because Derek's on the call, is Red Rum. You know, we worked a bunch of cases with the DEA task force. It was Group T32. One of them was when a retired detective named Donald Pagani got murdered doing a payroll drop. You know, he worked at a meat processing plant in Hunts Point. Got pulled over by some guys posing as cops. In the middle of the car stop, he realized, hey, these aren't cops. He shot and killed the guy on the driver's door. And thank God that guy fell and died there because we were able to exploit his phone. And the Red Rum people, I mean, we chased these people all over the place. Eventually got an extradition from Colombia. So I agree, Tommy. Decentralizing the homicide squads works, but federal task forces working on some of these homicides is also important, especially when you get cross borders. You have international components. Like these guys were Colombians that were in the United States doing drug robberies and jewelry store robberies. So, I mean, you know, you bring everything to the table, I think. You know, I think that's the best approach. But yeah, I mean, look, the local detectives know who the shitheads are. That should always be the starting point.
I'm sorry, Pete. I'm going to interrupt before we go back to Derek. Derek, it looks like power of attorney, whoever that is. Thanks for the comment. Terry, your dad, I'm not sure who he's talking to. I guess it's Terry Murnane. Terry Murnane
Yeah,
is the detective on here.
Talking about Buddy
Your
Murnane.
dad was a great guy, a gentleman, a real cop, and one of a kind. And by the way, shout out to Terry Murnane, great detective in Brooklyn North, but also his brother Buddy Murnane, which you know, Pete. So
Legend.
I just want to give a shout out to those guys before we go back to Derek.
Yeah.
Derek, your floor is yours.
So thank you. I mean, we had a little technical thing, but so I'm back on. I mean, look, I mean, one thing that I didn't tell you guys is that, you know, since I retired back in like 2014, my first time after I left the Special Operations Division, I felt like I had a calling that came around 2017 that I had to step up and help these poor families. So it sounds kind of corny, but I mean what I say. So Jackie Robinson had a quote where a life is not important except the impact it has on other lives, right? So I kind of felt like these families were desperately looking for somebody to step up and help them. And because I had so much background with the evolution of the chemical bombing of America, I felt that it was appropriate to get out there and start supporting them. So I was doing some documentaries. I was out there on the national news. I was doing stuff with Congress. But then in 2021, I went to the first Lost Voices of Fentanyl rally at the Chinese embassy. April Babcock, who lost her son, Austin, she formed an organization. When I first started with her, there was about 500, 600 folks on her Facebook group. There's now about 37,000. So unfortunately, it's grown so large because so many more kids died and families are desperately trying to, talk to families and try to learn. But anyway, the one thing I'll tell you is when I went to the Chinese embassy, we didn't even have really any media interest in this whole thing, despite the fact that we all pushed it out. But what really pissed me off is that, so Newsmax, they asked me to be on Newsmax that day, and it was right after the catastrophic event in Afghanistan when we lost like 13 brave Americans in that horrendous event. And so they wanted to talk to me not about the rally at the embassy, but about the tragedy in Afghanistan, which is fine. It was the news of the day. So I talked to them and I said, look, I know firsthand what it's like to bring back a family member in a body bag. So my heart goes out to all of those brave military men and women who died. But what about today, behind me at the Chinese embassy, we have families from 40 states in America that are desperately trying to get some attention to this bombing of America with deadly substances. And you know what? It was really sad after I did that interview because I realized like the media is not paying attention to this. So I got really pissed off. Now, one thing that you probably know by now, Pete knows for sure, is that's what created, like it caused me to create this massive collage project where I started making 25 slides, 90 dead kids through the Lost Voices of Fentanyl to be able to show Congress, to be able to go in the media, to be able to hold the collages up, to show people like this is real Americans that are dying. Wake the hell up. So then the Lost Voices of Fentanyl wound up starting their own collage project, which led to like this amazing professional collage library. I kind of already showed you some of these collages, but really it had the name, it had the age of the deceased, and then ultimately, thanks to the leadership in the DEA, one of my buddies at the time was like assistant administrator, and he came up with this idea to create the Faces of Fentanyl exhibit in DEA lobby. So they have thousands, like 5,000 pictures of all these dead kids in the DEA lobby. It got so overwhelming that they can't even hang any more photos because there's too many dead Americans. So now they have a virtual wall in the DEA, which is available on the website. But my point is that I felt obligated to give back to these poor families that buried their kids. And so it was really like, I feel like, it sounds kind of corny, but I feel like it was a calling to like do some more and help in any way you can. So it kept me busy for many years, like doing whatever I could, going to rallies, going on the media, introducing families to media celebrities, Dr. Phil, Fox News, Newsmax, whoever. And again, I didn't pick the networks that were calling me. I would have talked to anybody. But unfortunately, it became so politicized, like certain networks didn't want to talk about it. And this is why. Because there's two issues. One was the southern border, which was a political nightmare for the administration, the previous administration, keeping a wide open border, thinking that was a good idea. So our countries are saturated with all these unknown people from around the world, giving the cartels the ability to operate with impunity, to do whatever the hell they wanted to do at the border and make billions of dollars. That's why, by the way, I joined Tom Holman's Border 911.
Border 911.
Because we felt that was really important to go out to America and to educate them on the real dangers of a wide open border, not only from the migrant crisis, human trafficking, but the fact is that we wanted to make sure America understood what the cartels were doing, who they were working with. So it became a very good thing. Like in those pictures there, you could see, out there at the Lost Voices of Fentanyl rally, the Border 911 team, as you see there on the right, on my right, Rodney Scott, he's not a CBP commissioner, right? The guy is an unbelievable American patriot. He was the former Border Patrol, chief. He's really amazing. I love the guy. And then you see me and Tom Holman and Sarah Carter. Sarah Carter's now been nominated to be the drug czar. Tom is the border czar, and they're doing great work. I mean, look at the stats at the border. We have basically no illegal immigration now at the southern border, and they're not releasing any of these criminals into America. So anyway, it was a good experience, but the main point is we were trying to do anything we could do to educate all Americans, not just Republicans, on what the hell was going on here. Because to be honest with you, when I got called from a family member, which I still get called on a regular basis, I can't even keep up with the social media messages that I get from families that are losing not only one kid, but two kids. And I don't ask them, hey, did you vote for Donald Trump or were you voting for Biden? I don't really care. They all are Americans that lost their children. And there's nothing worse than losing a child. So I'm here to do whatever I could do. And the Border 911 team felt the same way. And that's why I'm excited to see Sarah Carter's work as the drug czar, because she's got a big heart. She cares about families. She cares about America. And she'll do anything in her power to help these poor families that are losing their kids at record levels.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Sarah Carter. I'm glad to hear that. I did not know that. That's good news. Pete, go ahead. And while you do that, I'm going to we're going to pull Derek back to some old days while you're asking your question and comment.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was at some of those rallies with Derek, not all of them, but the last two I attended. And behind them, you saw those pictures again. And I've seen people, strangers, walk through the rally and just start looking at the pictures. And you see that when they start getting to the pictures of little children and the babies, just being overcome with grief. So I commend Derek and the people from Lost Voices of Fentanyl for the education campaign that they're putting on. And look, I think that ideally, and I want to ask Derek this when we finish up, what does he think about some states I understand are pursuing the concept of prosecuting people for murder for dealing fentanyl, which I think is stellar. So we could touch on that later, maybe. But
yeah, let's definitely talk about. Yeah, Pete. Sorry, let's definitely pull that back because I want to. Let's just go through Derek's career. A couple more pictures. We got some really old school pictures. They're wonderful, and then we'll get into that. I definitely am so sure that they need to be prosecuted as murders. They are poisonings, and then I definitely want to get into the. As we talked about the Maine and the marijuana grow stuff. So, Derek, let's go back. Let's stop and go backwards a little bit. What is this picture? What do we got going on here?
When I was a young agent back in around 1989, long time ago, I went to Pakistan because we were doing a controlled delivery of 20 kilograms of heroin coming out of Pakistan that was being, sent to America to be able to be distributed to different organizations in the Northeast. So this is a picture I took on the streets of Afghanistan. I believe this one was in Karachi. This is a picture when I was in the DEA Academy in 1986, shooting like a sub gun or whatever it is. Pete would have a better understanding of what Tommy gun was. Huh?
Thompson. That's a Thompson.
Yeah. I have no idea because I'm not like a gun buff, but like, all I know, it was kind of cool to do the fully automatic or whatever the hell it was in those days. But that's just at the Quantico range down in 1986.
Wow. So, yeah. So let's go back to the Pakistan picture. I'm sorry. I didn't mean the quick that. So that's fascinating. As me, as a local cop, if I went to Jersey, it was a big deal. Right. So now here you are, a DEA agent traveling all over the world. What's that like? Any other good countries? Any other good stories?
So let me just tell you that story because it's kind of interesting. I think it is anyway. So there was an agent over there at the time named Mike Chapman. Mike Chapman's now the Loudoun County Sheriff. And he's done a phenomenal job keeping crime down in Loudoun County, Virginia. Now, Mike Chapman was a career DEA agent. He was assigned over there in Karachi, Pakistan. Their office had a very good informant that infiltrated one of the kingpins on the northwest province of Pakistan, right on the border of Afghanistan, and they were sending mass amounts of white heroin to America. So I went over there because the idea was our informant portrayed himself as somebody that had the ability to get the heroin into America and bypass customs in America. And the trafficker at the time, this guy named Salik John, he actually turned over the 20 kilos, gave it to the informant. The informant gave it to DEA Pakistan. And I went over there and transported it back to America with Mike Chapman. Now, the funny part of the story is, number one, I was scared out of my boots. I didn't want to stay in Pakistan even one night, even at his house. So I came in, did my thing, went to the airport with Mike, got the hell out of there. Because I didn't know. I'm a New York guy. I'd never been around that part of the world. And we were sitting in the airport with 20 kilos of heroin, guys walking around with, machine guns, the security. Everyone there knew who we were and what we were doing. So it was a little bit concerning to me. Obviously, we got the stuff back, and then we started doing controlled deliveries. We brought the informant back to the Melville Marriott in the middle of Long Island, and he was making phone calls back to Pakistan to all these local distributors that they were dealing with. They would come out of the woodwork. They would bring the sum of money. We do like a fake delivery, and then we arrest them. We take the money, and we go on to the next target. So we came across these old wise guys from New York, the old Purple Gang heroin guys.
Vinny Bassiano.
What's that?
Vinny Bassiano and his crew.
Yeah, this guy was Gaetano Di Girolamo and Louis Solano. They come out of the woodwork to the old Plainview Plaza Hotel, and they come with a down payment to pay the courier to get 12 kilograms of heroin. So Solano comes out in a paper bag, gives the money to the damn informant, and then we come in, we smack them down. Anyway, it was a way to learn about the job. It was to learn the prosecution. I had a full trial in the Eastern District of New York in that case. And Sterling Johnson, who was a good friend of my father's, the legendary special narcotics prosecutor and former NYPD guy. And Sterling was the judge on the case. And it was just a fascinating experience, for me as a young agent. But anyway, so that's just a little war story. But yeah, I've been all over the place. Colombia was also fascinating, Mexico, Dominican Republic, all these different countries impacting the U.S. drug, supply. It was a great time. I mean, I could go on and on about the different trips and the different cases and the experience. I guess the best thing I could say is, I always say, like, if you're going to build a skyscraper, you have to have a very solid foundation. Otherwise, the skyscraper will fall down, right? So as a DEA agent, I looked at my career as that I was trying to work my way up to build this skyscraper. If I had a shitty foundation, I never would have made it. So my success that I've had is because I had the greatest narcotics detectives and agents that were teaching me all the right ways of doing stuff, how you have to be professional, how you treat evidence, how you work with the state and locals, how you work with the other federal agencies. So I owe so much to the guys from like the Long Island office, especially, and then going into Manhattan and learning from the NYPD guys and the state police. So I don't want to downplay the importance of that. For like, I have friends that only worked with DEA agents their whole career. And then you look at them and you wonder why, like, they do certain things, because they didn't have the same level of experience in learning how to work with all these other agencies, which is absolutely critical.
Yeah. So drop some names. Let's see if we have any mutual friends in the New York City Police Department's DEA, Drug Enforcement Task Forces, anything like that. Pete, I mean, I know you were there and then you split and cut out and went the Fed route, but let's see if we can get some shout outs for some good people.
Yeah, so when I was a supervisor in the New York Task Force as a brand new group supervisor, I had an all-star team, and my detectives were, well, my first sergeant was Patrick Keene, who Pete knows. He works later moved on to Red Rum. Patty Keene was awesome. I had detectives like Bernie Malone, Scotty Fowler, Patty O'Leary, Eddie O'Day, right? Bobby Del Rio. These guys were working in Bronx narcotics and doing spectacular work, teaching me stuff that I never even could have dreamed of. Like, for example, sitting in Hunts Point in a van I was doing all the video. I was obsessed with video recording. And sitting there at a site in Hunts Point where all day long these guys were moving little bags of heroin, and NYPD was going in there doing buy bust all day long. It was the Masonette organization there in Hunts Point. They were killers. They controlled several blocks, all the heroin distribution. Back in those days, you buy a bag at $10 a bag, and you put it on a table, you snort 90% white heroin. Well, I was out there with these detectives, and we were doing car stops on the customers, building up a federal conspiracy, and it was such amazing, like experience that you learn from being out there in the middle of that rat race of Hunts Point. So, like, those guys taught me so much stuff, and then of course, I worked with some of the best state police investigators, my DEA agents. Quick story, because this is a lesson in life for everybody. So in that group, which was handpicked because Bill Mochler, the legendary chief of the task force, established a South American heroin program back in the early 90s. He wanted to prove that the Colombian cartels were very involved with distributing white heroin. And nobody believed him. Everyone doubted him because he was like this visionary DEA leader. And of course, the insecurity in the government agencies. The guy got a lot of attention. He was a visionary starting SOD, and the guy was like my mentor. So he picked me to be his supervisor of this group. And the bottom line is what we learned is that when they're selling like 90% heroin on the streets of the Bronx, that the mill operation in the Bronx was one level away from the Colombian, and then that was going back into Colombia. So we went up doing like these awesome extraditions. And we work stuff, like, as they say, from the farm to the arm, right? But we would basically bring these cases federally, and we had the greatest prosecutors in New York. Most important guy, that I recall is Rich Sullivan, who's now like a Second Circuit Court of Appeals judge, who was very, very patient with us, who believed in us, who supported us on many wiretap applications. But we had a machine going because, you guys know how it is. You're only as good as your people, right? So I got a hand-picked group of these professional detectives that knew what the hell they were doing, that understood New York City, understood, global drug trafficking. I mean, shit, I worked right next to the group, with Jerry Spezial, legendary detective, NYPD, who worked with Bernie Kerrick, God bless him, just passed away at 69 years old. The former police commissioner. These guys all work for my father. So it was the greatest environment to work in with some of the best and brightest. But again, going back to my point, by having that experience, it helped me build the solid foundation to grow, to be a better leader as I grew into the role of DEA executive. So again, my hat goes off to every one of them. And some of them, unfortunately, are no longer here with us. As Pete knows firsthand, America forgets 9/11 cancer. They forget it's not only the people that evaporated in the buildings as they collapsed. It's all the brave men and women from the fire department, from the police, that went out there to save Americans that later died. So many. I had a whole group of people from NYPD in my task force that died from 9/11 cancer. So again, I get very emotional, passionate about that, but I really attribute a lot of my success over the years to the Long Island Task Force guys and the NYPD State Police Task Force with the DEA. But going back to the story I was telling, because I went all over the board there, but
can I pump the brakes for a second? So
hold on. No, hold on.
No, okay, it's your day. It's your day.
I can't forget this because this is too important. In my group, in that same group, I had an agent named Mike Labasso. Mike Labasso was one of the greatest agents. He was in his house in Huntington on a Sunday morning. His wife went to the grocery store. Mike Labasso liked archery, so he's out there doing the bow and arrows. He had a 5-year-old and I believe 3-year-old Michael and Lisa. I think her baby was Lisa. I can't remember. Bottom line is, his mom comes home. Dad's not there. She's asking the kids, "Where's Dad?" Well, the cesspool collapsed in his backyard, and the poor guy went into the cesspool. It took emergency services 2 days to get him out of the cesspool. Of course, he was dead almost instantly. And that was a life lesson to me. Of course, I did the eulogy at his funeral. But like everybody complains, right, in this country, in law enforcement. But there's always a story out there that's a lot worse, right? We all should be grateful what we have. So I used that in a lot of leadership speeches, but I didn't want to forget Mikey Labasso because he was a key member of that all-star group that was handpicked for me. Sorry, Tom, but had to tell that story.
No.
That's important stuff.
This is your day. It's your episode. Everything you want to talk about. But yeah, going back to, so I just remember going to CompStat starting in '95 when I was a new sergeant, getting introduced to it. And then our chief, who one of my favorites of all time, Louis Anamone, you might have dealt with him.
Yeah.
He used to say that we would go to CompStat, and if we had a murder and you could not identify the motive, then you can assume it's narcotics related until you prove otherwise. And I can't argue with it. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, you know, drugs have been involved with so much devastation in America. And if you go back over time, you know, it's just very sad because, in my view, we never properly addressed the demand side. You know, we've done pretty good over the years in hitting the cartels in Colombia, in Mexico, in Dominican Republic, but the supply side is only one part of it. If people are turning to drugs for help and we're not helping these people, we're not going to beat the bad guys, right? They're just going to have more and more customers. And unfortunately, that's what it's evolved into. And I do believe with some basic, you know, attention to the demand side and to get some more aggressive enforcement on the cartels, we can have a lot of success. But, you know, again, drugs, gangs, guns, human trafficking, right? Human smuggling, right? Counterfeiting. It's all transnational organized crime. That's why it's real simple. If the good guys are not working together, the bad guys are going to get the best of us, all right? If the good guys are coming together, then the bad guys better come together. So I am very, very appreciative of the current administration is putting together what I believe is a whole of government approach. Now, hopefully it works. Hopefully agencies can cooperate and work together. But for my entire life as the head of the Special Operations Division, I tried to build a whole of government approach. Unfortunately, I did not have the buy-in from most of the other agency heads because you know how it is, right? It was to set up in a DEA operation. So, you know, people weren't buying in. And sadly, we didn't have the leaders pushing that down. Right now, in this administration, they're pushing it down. They expect, you know, cooperation, and they expect, you know, a unity of effort. They expect the agencies to come together, and we haven't had that before. We'll see if it works, but I'm at least excited that they're at least doing that now.
Yeah. Hey, Derek, I got a question for you. We talked a little bit earlier about these contraband cigarettes and all these other products showing up. And I know that we all grew up in New York, and I don't even know what a carton of cigarettes costs in New York anymore. A pack's probably close to $20, right? And then you look at the previous administration, the Biden administration, they were looking at banning combustible nicotine products, which would be like cigarettes, maybe even cigars. I mean, who knows? And look, my parents were both smokers, you know. And then at the same time, though, there's marijuana dispensaries popping up all over the place, right? Which is kind of contradictory, right? You can't smoke there, Gramps, but the kid down the block can go buy weed. Tommy touched on it earlier. There's this trend of the Chinese, again, our friends, the Chinese, operating marijuana grow operations throughout the United States. And I know you have a lot more knowledge about that than I do. Can you touch on that? Because I think that would blow most people's minds.
So to get back to your original point, right? By banning certain things, it's going to create the black market, which is nothing new, right?
Right.
So in America, the Chinese were very, very strategic, very smart. I give them credit by implementing this type of plan. So as part of the unrestricted warfare against America, they recognized that America was not really, too serious about, marijuana, right? Because in many states it's legalized, right? It's legal to smoke marijuana. The prosecutors don't want to prosecute. So the Chinese criminals started to come in and set up these operations all over the country. Our own government facilitated their entry into America, which is mind-boggling to me. We had record amounts of Chinese nationals coming into America during the last administration. And so they set up these grow operations all over the country. Like Oklahoma, for example, is like ground zero, okay? And they went into these different states that had legalized marijuana to kind of take advantage of like the weak laws that were in those states. But there was a leaked DHS memo that went out in about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I can't remember. And there's a reporter from New York Post who's a friend of mine who picked up on the story. It was identified that 270 grow operations were identified in the state of Maine alone, and it was Chinese nationals running these operations. And it was a very, very, very aggressive investigative reporter from the Maine Wire, Steve Robinson, who I talk to and communicate with on a regular basis. He ran with the story, started knocking on doors, started figuring out that these Chinese nationals were buying all these properties and converting the houses into, very sophisticated grow operations. The utility, meters were, the electric was off the charts. The monthly, bills were exorbitant. He started studying this stuff. Anyway, and we started putting pressure. I mean, I was on, many national news shows about this, trying to illuminate this in the country. But of course, most people weren't paying attention because it was only marijuana. The problem is, what people are not recognizing is that the THC in the marijuana today is being, up to like, 25 to 30% THC levels. Back in the day when we all grew up, it was like 5% or whatever the hell it was. The THC today is very dangerous, according to some experts, at least in the illicit side. And then when you look at, they're spraying the crops with Chinese pesticides. So why the hell would they import these chemicals from China and then spray it on the crop? What's their motive for that? Now, I'm not an expert on chemicals, but we've heard a lot of warnings about pesticides can cause cancer and all this nonsense, right? So now, think about it. I'm a common sense guy, right? I didn't go to Harvard or Yale. I barely got out of college, okay? Now, here's the deal. Why would the Chinese nationals coming to America want to spray the crops with Chinese pesticides? Why would they want to create marijuana 25 to 30%? Well, I have an opinion about it, which I can almost validate based on the facts and the people I've talked to, because the kids think it's okay to smoke marijuana. They're not going into the legal dispensaries to buy it. They're buying it on the street, which is dominated by the Chinese, nationals. Now they're smoking joints that are 25 to 30% THC, and then they're getting really, really high, and then they get really, really low, and then they go to the emergency room because they're freaking out, and they're being diagnosed with marijuana psychosis, marijuana schizophrenia, and we have this unbelievable rise in hospital admissions, right? Emergency room admissions, because these kids, they're turning again to what they think is a safe substance, marijuana, but the Chinese are planning this, they're involved in this unrestricted warfare for many years, and they know that's going to operate under the radar. No one's going to pay attention, and then they're going to kill off our kids, and they're going to harm our communities, harm our families. That really is disturbing to me, because it's very, very strategic. And America, shame on every American politician and government leader that's not stepping out and talking about this. Now, here's what's interesting.
Derek,
Under this
let me do this.
administration,
Derek, if I may.
Yeah.
We had a 4-minute video that I want to that you shared with us. Let's set this up so
Okay.
that we can pull the audience in, can set that up, and then talk on the dovetail. This is the one with Rachel Campos Duffy on Fox.
Yep.
So let's do that because I think it really frames it up nice, and then we can get back into it because I am really interested in this, and I think you're 100% right on the politicians ignoring it, including this comment right here. Maine governor. I think she's turned a blind eye to this. We'll get into that. Let me play this video.
Threat America faces from China taking a sinister new turn as Chinese investors are reportedly behind hundreds of illegal marijuana cultivation sites right here in the U.S., with more than 100 growing operations in the state of Maine alone. Our next guest says Chinese crime networks and Mexican cartels are taking advantage of soft on crime policies right here in the U.S. Former DEA Special Ops Director Derek Maltz is here to explain. So, Derek, you were one of the very first people to talk about this connection, and it was a real mind opener for me, between the cartels and the Chinese, and not just the Chinese mafia, but the Chinese government, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. So the cartels want to make money, but the Chinese have a different angle. So talk to me about this operation and how each of those sides are getting what they want out of this.
Rachel, thank you very much. I mean, law enforcement's been ringing the bell about this, and I've been talking this 6 years now.
Yes.
But you have a situation where Chinese criminals are taking total advantage of the weak policies, the open border. Director Wray has warned the country many times that China is the biggest national security threat. So now when you look at the bombing of America with synthetic chemicals like fentanyl, you look at the sourcing of the multi-ton quantities of precursor chemicals, you look at providing them, the cartels, all the money laundering services now, and then you look at the mass amounts of Chinese military-age men coming into our country.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell do people think they're coming here for? Now you look at the marijuana grow operations, they're making billions of dollars. They're sending money back to China. They're buying property, buying farmland. They're all over the country. And the government isn't even talking about it. You have all these reporters. It's not just Maine, Rachel, Oklahoma, California, Colorado, all these states that have the legalized pot. But Rachel, here's my opinion, that they're using these chemicals, the high THC in the marijuana now, to poison our supply
Yes.
of marijuana. And I say poison in the sense it's causing brain damage to our kids and people smoking this stuff. There's studies out there about increased psychosis, schizophrenia. So it's another tactic to destabilize America, in my view.
Absolutely. There's this like fantasy that pot is like organic and sustainable and like good for you because it's natural. But indeed, this is not the same pot from maybe the 1950s and 60s and 70s. This has really high THC and there's a lot of chemicals involved, which is what the Chinese are there for, right? They're the ones, smuggling the chemicals over to put into the pot.
So, Rachel, keep in mind right now, there's Americans that are dying from xylazine. They're rotten from the inside out. And it's because of the chemicals coming from Chinese labs, or the nitazine, etinitazine, isonitazine, more powerful synthetic chemicals. Look at the K2 in spice in 2008, 2012, when I was at the Special Operations Division. Nobody knew what these chemicals were, but they were destroying our kids, our future generation. Yesterday was Veterans Day. Look at all the military members that are dying from synthetic drugs and fentanyl, for example. So you're 100% right. I'm very happy to hear that you comprehended this massive problem. And remember, we've had over a 7,000% increase in the last 2 years of Chinese nationals, many military-age men, crossing into our country illegally. How many are in the gotaways, Rachel?
Yes.
We don't know. How many
That's
are already
right.
here?
That's right. 24,000 just this fiscal year. It's an astounding number. I think it's up 800% from anything we've ever seen before. And of course, our president asleep at the wheel with anything that has to do with China. I wonder why. Derek, so great to have you on. You've been really prescient on so many of these issues with drugs, cartels, and the China connection. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good stuff, brother.
So, Derek, I want to get into some comments before we move on and get your commentary on that. Their motive is genocide, right? Look at this. Why aren't more Americans watching this video? The Chinese should never own property in the U.S.
Amen.
It does not have to be limited to pesticides. Biologics in their fungus can cause massive infections. I'm not Chronicles of the Collapse. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but I'm going to turn it back over to
if I can, don't forget, recently a young lady was caught entering Michigan with fungus that was designed to infect our plants, crops. So, I mean, I don't think that's out of the realms of possibility.
Right. So let me go back to a couple things. Number one, like, obviously in my simple brain, this is just chemical war. We're at war with them. And unfortunately, America hasn't really aggressively dealt with it. Now, if you notice right now, there's a lot more conversation on the news about these Chinese nationals and the grow operations. There's been several indictments. That's because the current DOJ, the current administration, wants to identify who they are and arrest them and indict them and hold them accountable. There's also been a lot of talk in the news about restricting the Chinese nationals from buying property, farmland, real estate. But what the average American doesn't know is that every day in America, Chinese nationals, in many cases young kids that are here on visas, are getting a call from the money broker in Mexico to meet a cartel operative in some city and pick up a suitcase of cash to launder that cash back to the cartels in Mexico. And it's very sophisticated and it's very difficult to penetrate because what they do is the Chinese businessman will take the suitcase of cash, 500,000 in cash. He'll get on his phone and he'll move 500 grand from his bank account in China to Pete's bank account in China. Pete will put together a $500,000 order of sneakers, computers, toys, clothing. He'll send it to Mexico. So Pete's a legitimate business guy in China. He'll send it to Mexico and they'll sell those goods at the Chinese flea markets. And they'll make like the equivalent of like, let's just say 4 million in pesos, US dollars. They'll take 500 grand. They'll pay the cartel leaders. So the money's been laundered. And then all these business owners make money. Everybody's making money. Meanwhile, the Chinese that are in our country are then using the cash to buy property, to pay for college, to whatever they're doing, gambling. And they're laundering the money. And they have a law in China, I think they call it the capital flight laws. The Chinese business guys can't export more than $50,000 a year out of their account. So they need the cashier to do all these activities. So they're using the cartel cash. There was a study out a few years ago. It was reported in one of the Washington media outlets. I think it was Washington Inquirer. They did a study and they determined there was $6.1 billion in purchases of real estate from Chinese nationals in America for a 1-year period. And 58% of those transactions were in cash. So where the hell do you think they're getting the cash from?
Exactly.
They don't have the ability to bring the cash in from China, so they're picking it up from the cartels. So we have this dangerous alliance here, but yet American lawmakers and like law enforcement and politicians are not talking about this. This is absurd. And Chris Wray is telling everyone when he's FBI director that China is the biggest national security threat to our country. But yet we're letting them in at record levels. How does this make sense to anybody with a brain?
It doesn't. So I'll tell you something. I went through the Army War College's senior leader development program because they let some civilians in. So I went through when I was a GS-15 back in 2015, so 10 years ago. And one of the hot topics there, this is unclassified, was that China has a 100-year plan to succeed the United States as the world superpower. And you know what amazes me, and you guys will understand this, they have a plan, 100 years, right? They have the time. They stick to their plan. They're disciplined people. We have elected officials that can't stick together through a federal pay period.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
That's 100% right, Pete. And that's the scary part. And that's kind of what I've been trying to illuminate. But unfortunately, it's like, talking to the wind a lot of days, right? But I've been pretty consistent for like about 8 years, starting with the documentary I did with Sarah Carter called Not in Vain, where we're illuminating the threats with the border and the Chinese and the poisoning of America. But now look, we're now 2025, and now we're seeing fentanyl all over the place, and we're seeing methamphetamine coming in at record levels, and it's very, very pure meth. It's like 100% pure meth.
Yeah.
It's destroying our citizens.
Yeah. So Derek, if I can jump in here, because when you prompted it, I'm gonna jump on a sword and admit my ignorance as well. Hood Mayor, New York City, with a comment. Glad I tuned in. I had no idea about Chinese in the weed game. I heard dribs and drabs. I've heard about Chinese takeovers. I'm going to go back to a comment here by VR Forever. The Chinese nationals are taking over paper mills in Maine and other areas. I've heard they bought sardine canneries. They're buying commercial locations, schools. They're buying all sorts of properties in not only Maine, but the Maine is the one that I'm focused on. Oklahoma, and you said, Derek, what were the other states?
I mean, you name the state, it's all over the place. California, Oregon, Washington State, Colorado. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, I went out to the DEA Colorado, and I was getting briefed at lunch by the SAC, the special agent in charge, and the deputy special agent in charge. And they were telling me stuff that I really wasn't up to speed on. They were showing me these beautiful homes in Colorado where the Chinese nationals were buying the homes, paying cash in a lot of cases, and they were converting these beautiful homes in residential areas into indoor grow operations. And they were showing me the pictures of the plants that they were growing. And it was mind-boggling to me because I had never seen that kind of stuff, honestly. And so this kind of spread everywhere, and the politicians weren't really holding these illicit, grow operators accountable because no one really cared about marijuana. But no one was paying attention to the THC levels and, of course, the Chinese pesticide, problem. That's a national security issue, right? We still don't know what these pesticides are. And DEA is working a lot of cases now across the country with different agencies of government to try to really identify what the hell's going on here. So I expect to see more and more reporting on this, but it's a shame that this has been going on so long and no one was talking about it.
Yeah, so let me bring everyone's attention to the map on the left-hand side of the screen. I believe MaineWire.com is reporting that the red are the new houses or properties that have been acquired, and the yellow are the older ones. There's like 250 to 300 of these in rural Maine. You can see they're off the coast. The coastal elites, they all run around in kind of Bunkport and Portland, and they do their thing. They don't even know what's going on in the interior in Maine. And every one of those properties where there's a pin map, as I understand it, and Derek, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that these are converted properties into grow houses that are in violation of all sorts of building codes, electric codes, taxes, everything. And they are pumping out. And I would even go as far as saying that these people are being trafficked as labor slaves. This is outrageous. And I cannot believe that Maine Wire has tried to get interviews with politicians, and there's not one politician in the state of Maine other than Senator Susan Collins who has paid attention to this. I don't know how far she's gone, but she's the only one that granted Maine Wire an interview. Is that
well?
How you
Anyway, Maine Wire, Steve Robinson's the main reporter. There's a documentary out right now with Tucker Carlson where it's out there and it's getting a lot of attention now because Steve has been pushing this thing for a while now, and he's finally got the traction. And Tucker Carlson was fascinated by the story and the impact to U.S. national security. Of course, nobody was really paying attention to this until the leaked memo was out. And then we all started. I was on Fox shows with Steve Robinson, like Laura Ingraham, and we talked about this and this explosive problem But to be honest, though, no one was really digesting the magnitude of it because of the politics in America.
Pete, you're on mute.
How about now? Sorry about that. I wondered, looking back at recent past, China, again, with a 100-year plan, patience, discipline. We know for a fact that one of the congressmen, not to get political and conspiratorial, Eric Swalwell, was having an affair with a Chinese spy. We know that, Dianne Feinstein had a driver for years who was affiliated with a Chinese spy. Recently, there was someone from, I believe, the New York State Attorney General's office or the governor's office that had ties to the CCP. You had the Bidens who had taken a ton of money from the CCP. I wonder how deeply the Chinese have penetrated our political class. And again, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but some of this stuff is already known. You wonder what we don't know. Because I'm sure that influences some of the decisions that are made on how strategically we're going to attack these criminal organizations that are tied to China and candidly to the cartels as well.
So, Pete, I just want to tell you, one of the things that was really frustrating for me, and I've been on this campaign for several years to get professional athletes, celebrities, role models, and influencers to speak out about all these emerging trends for national security. And I can't get like anybody in the NFL, the NBA, right? Major League Baseball, we have one hero in my mind. He's a pitcher for the San Francisco Giants, right? With the last name of Webb. And this particular pitcher, he's an all-star this year. Actually, the all-star game's on tonight. He lost his cousin, and he's speaking out about this stuff. But you wonder why, our celebrities and role models with hundreds of millions of followers don't want to speak out on this issue regarding the Chinese bombing of America. Well, when you peel back the onion, a lot of this stuff, the sneakers, the clothing, the apparel, the big contracts. I'm not an expert on this, but the Chinese are involved. And so nobody wants to talk. I'm not going to mention what team, but I have a mother who lost their kid. And the kid is very friendly with a professional football player. So this kid, Nike had a promo about your cause and your cleats, whatever the hell it was called. So he put this nonprofit on his cleats, Demand Zero was right on his cleats. Demand Zero is the organization in Connecticut. Bottom line is, this kid wanted to speak out about his friend that he lost in Connecticut without mentioning names or families. And then the NFL basically told the mother, she was complimenting the kids proactiveness on talking out about this. The NFL and the agent told the mother to take down the tweet on social media because they didn't want to taint the player. I'm sitting there going, what are you talking about, taint the player? He's trying to save kids' lives. What the hell's wrong with these people?
Well, let's recently also John Cena, the famous wrestler, tough guy, former military member. He made some comments that weren't complimentary to China and was forced to grovel at their feet and apologize.
Yeah.
So obviously, they have a lot of influence over not just politics, but over the entertainment world as well.
Right. The entertainment world and the money. And again, I'm not an expert on that stuff, but it really breaks my heart to think about an NFL player who lost his buddy, who was a high school buddy of his, and he made it big on a very important team in the NFL. Let's leave it at that. And this kid, all he wanted to do is speak out and support this cause. And his agent and the NFL told him, no, you can't do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've heard all the stories. Again, none of us are experts, but what we hear, Tom Cruise being told what patches he can wear on his jacket for Hollywood and what's driving the Hollywood stuff. I'm just going to say it right now, guys. And this is the Ten-Four Tavern. So we're saying what we say as cops, as American citizens, as New Yorkers, which we can live anywhere. I think the Chinese have too much influence into this country. They permeated too far. And I don't have any problem with a Chinese person, but clearly the CCP is done a long game job on us for a very long time. Can we stop it, please? Can we please stop it?
Yeah. So basically, yeah, it is what it is. Don't quite understand it, but things seem to be changing in a positive way, and we'll see what happens. But again, there's so many issues coming at the administration every day. It's hard to keep up with all the challenges. So I don't know what's going to happen, but the families are out there working as an army all across America. They're doing education. They're putting up billboards. They're creating materials. I just hope President Trump and this administration will mandate, education in all schools in America. They will actually, make sure that the kids are learning about this synthetic drug poisoning. And also, I want to see celebrities and ambassadors that will reach out and get on, the social media sites, create 45-second, reels that the kids can learn from, because all the kids are on social media all day long. If we're not putting material on social media, they're not going to learn. They're not watching podcasts. They're not watching congressional testimony. They're not watching cable news. They're not watching mainstream media. They're on the phones all day long. So you don't have to be a genius to figure this out. If you want to educate the kids and make an impact, go to the social media and get people that have hundreds of millions of followers. I tried like hell. Last February, there were 3 Kansas City Chiefs fans that froze to death in the backyard watching a Kansas City Chiefs playoff football game. And I knew as soon as I saw the story that there must have been fentanyl inside of cocaine, as an example. That's what I thought. I told my wife the first day. When the autopsy came out, sure enough, these 3 kids, they were snorting cocaine. They thought it was cocaine. It had fentanyl. They died. I was hoping by putting out on social media, maybe Taylor Swift with 300 million followers, or Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, maybe they would speak out. They're such celebrities in the middle of the Super Bowl season. They'd come out and speak about this problem. Now, I didn't expect them to read my tweet, and I was very nice about it. I wasn't being political. I wasn't being a joke, but Taylor Swift has 300 million Instagram followers. If she did one tweet for 45 seconds about this poisoning, you realize how many lives she can save? I believe in my heart, maybe I'm naive, that if Taylor Swift really truly understood what's going on in this country for the future generation, then maybe she would want to help. Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, maybe they'd want to help. The problem is they don't want to talk about drugs because they don't really understand what's going on. This is not really a drug crisis. It's a poisoning of our country crisis. And I'm pretty sure that most celebrities, if they understood the real issues, they'd want to help and save some lives. But then when they have sponsors and TV shows and commercials and all this stuff, they think it's political. They don't want you to get involved. So then they just run away from it. And it's really sad.
Tragic. It's tragic.
Yeah, Pete, go ahead, Pete, because I want to definitely comment on this.
Yeah, it's tragic. I mean, it's sad. And look, they have the bully pulpit. They have the podium. They can influence a lot of people. They choose not to. Hey, look, I always used to say, as a leader in law enforcement, to take no action is an action. You know what I mean? If you make a decision to not engage, that can potentially come back and hurt you. And I think it should hurt them, frankly, because they can influence people and they're choosing not to. And for whatever reason, I mean, there's no good reason to not try to save a life by educating the public. And look, some of them could potentially be their fans, So, I mean, I don't understand that. It's disturbing.
So let me jump in on this. So on our first podcast episode at the Ten-Four Tavern, where we bellied up to the bar and we had a cocktail, Carlos Canino said, and he was very vulnerable. He opened up. He admitted some things that he may or may not have done in other venues, but he did. He actually broke down. God bless him. And I think it's perfectly okay for any man to shed a tear once in a while and show their vulnerabilities. But that being said, we all agreed on that podcast. If my message can change one person and save one person's life, that's enough. and then all the other ones that fall in behind it is fine. So Derek, I'm going to go back to you. The following that all the celebrities that you mentioned with the Taylor Swifts, the Kelseys, Mahomes, and all the other celebrities, I don't understand how they can't understand what's going on, but they don't. But just all they have to do is say, "Don't take a pill." And I'm going to bring up a comment from VR Forever. Kids can't take drugs from each other or their parents' medicine cabinets, and grandmas can't share their pain meds at knitting circle. I know that what I've talked to my kids and my nephews about is unless you see that pill come across the prescription, the pharmacy's desk, you do not take a pill that you do not know its origin from. If you did not see it personally come across the desk from the pharmacy, you do not take that pill. Comments, guys. What do you think?
100%.
Well, I mean, look, it's easier said than done. If I'm in college and I'm studying for an exam and Pete has a legitimate prescription of Adderall for attention deficit and I'm not sleeping, I can't focus, and Pete, as my friend, says, hey, take this Adderall because it's going to help you. And I take one pill and then I take a second pill of legitimate Adderall from a prescription bottle. And I start feeling good and my grades start going up. And I'm a 21-year-old kid. And then I can't get a pill from Pete, but I can go online and order an Adderall pill. And I'm not being educated how the illicit drug supply is tainted. And I take one pill and I die. Look at those two Ohio State girls. One was a pre-med student in May of like 2 years ago. I can't remember the year. They took what they thought was Adderall and they died. And everybody was shocked about it, right? Well, I wasn't shocked because this has been evolving many years. I mean, I don't want to go through this whole book, but I do presentation after presentation where you have mass poisonings all over the country where multiple people are dying in one location. Here's 9 in, Cleveland, Ohio. Here's 18 on one weekend in Harrisburg. The mayor's saying, we have a crisis here. Well, no shit. We've had a crisis for years. There's my post with Taylor Swift and the 3 Kansas City fans, right? Here's all the celebrities that have died from fentanyl. Here's the hockey player up in Boston, Jimmy Hayes. And what does the widow say? She was shocked after the cause of death was revealed. That's the headlines. Because the guy was using cocaine. Historically, cocaine wasn't going to kill you. It would certainly cause some damage to your heart. It's a dangerous drug. I'm not advocating for snorting cocaine. But the guy died. He had this promising career. His brother is also an NHL player, right? You look at some of these athletes with the future that they had, right? Including, right, the Heisman Trophy winner, right? Cole Brennan, okay? Olympic athletes. Then you look at Ray Lewis, the legendary, Baltimore Ravens NFL player. He lost his kid. Then you look at Robert De Niro, lost his grandson. Now, here's the sad part of the De Niro story. So Robert De Niro, legendary actor, could have gone out with his, fame and celebrity status and talked about the death of his kid, his grandkid. But instead, he went down to the courthouse outside when Trump was getting, prosecuted and starts holding like press conferences about Trump. Like, in all due respect, De Niro's a great actor. We've all watched his movies, but his platform could have been so important for the country. And even though he's a little older and a lot of kids maybe not following him, he still has a huge network. Now, his daughter is finally connected with New York DEA, Frank Tarantino, and the faces of fentanyl. And the daughter, and even now, De Niro is starting to do some stuff to try to put the messaging out. So I do give him credit in that sense. But it's like it doesn't stop, right? Rap artists. But now look at this with the military. You think China doesn't realize by putting fake opioids out there, our military people aren't going to use these pills? They're dying at record levels. Look at the headlines. Fentanyl has taken a record toll on Army families. They demand answers. The families demand answers. Hundreds of service members have lost their lives to the overdoses, right? Bottom line is, this is insanity. And so this is something that's been going on for so many years now. And now finally, because of politics, certain politicians are coming out of the woodwork and making like they really care. Well, where the hell were you when I was throwing up dead kids in the hearings I testified to several years ago? I would bring the collages and throw them up in the sky and talk about the dead kids. But they must have thought I was like some crazy New York guy. Well, you know what? No, I'm not crazy. I'm trying to support these families and save lives. So shame on all of those politicians, because they have to look in the mirror at night. And I know if I look in the mirror, I'm doing everything I can do, right? So who doesn't want to save kids?
Exactly. So Derek, you know what? The De Niro story also shame. I didn't know it. And then Hood Mayor, New York City. You have to pay the celebrities until it hits close to home. It didn't even matter for De Niro, actually. So, like, what is going to change and really get their attention?
I wish I can answer that, because right now there's been so many people died. I mean, at one point we were talking about, 300 Americans a day are dying. And that's like, like Pete said earlier, you said it, Tommy, with all the wars, if you combine, like, for example, 9/11, the Afghan and Iraq war, roughly 10,000 people died. Okay, in those three things, right? So think about it, right, for a second. How many have died from this poisoning, and nobody's really talking out about it? Now we're starting to get a little bit more, but it's just unbelievable, like, that people are not like outraged about this.
What you're talking about, brother?
Yeah,
Heroically.
look,
Heroically.
I'll continue to do my part. I mean, I know we've made some progress. Like, I know tomorrow they're going to be doing a signing at the White House with the president, and there's a lot of my families that are going to be there. I couldn't make it, unfortunately, due to a conflict, but they're signing like the whole Fentanyl Act, and I'm sure President Trump will talk about this devastation in the country. So at least we're talking about it now, and we actually have some good enforcement activity. But again, if President Trump was to be listening to this, and I'm not saying he is, but you gotta educate. You gotta educate every kid in America to save the future. If you don't educate the kids, it's just going to continue, because they're all, depressed. They have anxiety. They're turning to drugs for help. But unfortunately, the illicit drug supply is totally tainted.
Well, brother, you've done God's work here, man. And, it's interesting, Derek. One of the things I admire about you is that you recognize something that I take to heart, and I know Tommy does as well, and look, a lot of us do, is that our oaths didn't come with an expiration date. And while we're not out there enforcing the law anymore, we're still doing the best we can to just be good citizens and to help get the message out or to support law enforcement. So, I mean, and you've done it far more than I have, or pretty much anyone else I know. So I really commend your efforts here. And I know they're from the heart, man, which is inspiring.
Yeah, so like for me, like what inspires me is just watching the army of families working selflessly to get out there and save lives, even though they lost their kids. So for me, it's almost like I feel like obligated, like in my mind, to do whatever I can to support them. There's a actual one family member that recently sent me a plaque, and I wish I could see where I put it on the wall here. But basically, they called me the voice of the voiceless, right? So besides the title of father and husband, that's a pretty good title to have, right? The voice of the voiceless. I can't even figure out where the hell I put it. And she sent me a picture on the back of the plaque with her and, me and her at the rally. And so those are the kind of things that make me feel like at least I'm trying to help, in any small way. Where the hell is the damn thing? I hung it up. Oh, I know where it is. It's right outside my office.
Look, I've seen the families interact with you, brother. And look, one thing that is abundantly clear is that you're genuine in your wanting to help them. And look, they see it. I mean, I was inspired beating somebody serious. Like I said,
Let
I've
me-
heard from some of them, and the only connection I have to them is that I know you. So what you've done from the bottom of your heart, and it shows, which is impressive, very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, look, DEA, I give them a lot of credit because, like, the former administrator of DEA, along with my friend I was talking about before, assistant administrator, they created the Faces of Fentanyl. They created a campaign, One Pill Can Kill. They put out a lot of education materials. There was a lot of media that the former administrator did about, the dangers of fentanyl. She created a family summit, both in Washington and also regionally out there. So they did a lot, but you know what? This problem is never going to be solved with law enforcement alone. You can't arrest your way out of this problem. You have to shut down the cartels. They must feel the accountability. We must use all tools of national power to deal with them, but you also need to educate the kids so they stay away from these substances because they have a very, high probability of dying. See, when we grew up, we all learned from mistakes. But unfortunately, now the kids are dying for mistakes.
Yeah, tragic.
Yeah, so I just brought up 2 pictures that you shared with us, Derek, that you wanted to put up. And the fact that you shared those with me, like when I said, hey, let's get some pictures, talk about your career, let's bring it up, what's your motive? Like you sent pictures of families who are all holding up and then clearly tonight's episode with all the pictures behind, all your props that you put up. Clearly, you're dedicated to the family. So I'm going to give you one last opportunity to just talk about what the pictures are here, what the demonstration was that you sent, and then any comments we'll add to, and then we'll go around the horn and wrap it up because we're pushing on 2 hours now.
Yeah, this is good because I didn't eat dinner tonight, so I'm gonna go eat. But
Oh no.
so that was just a couple of photos. I had a whole library of photos from the last Lost Voices of Fentanyl rally in DC. There's another one this year, the 5th annual Lost Voices of Fentanyl rally, October 18th in DC, and marching up to the White House. Families from all over the country will be there. Pete may even be there again because he's a dedicated patriot who
I'll be there.
supported the families and supported me personally. So I thank Pete for that. And, the idea was just to raise awareness, to try to get people to understand. And we had citizens from around the world learning about this because, fentanyl is here in America now, but the cartels will take that substance overseas if they have to just to make a buck. And there's addicted people all over the world from heroin and opioids so they can sell their products around the world. So we're trying to take the leadership for the world on the education campaign. But the families, April Babcock particularly, she runs this one. But we have families all over the country. We have an event in August in Times Square with the faces. You can see in the back here, we have another organization facing fentanyl. They have their national event. And obviously, this is the founder, Andrea Thomas. There, she has her daughter, Ashley, who died. And we basically have these events because we want to just spread maximum awareness. And anytime I can participate, I will. But anyway, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I appreciate your attention to this important topic. And I thank you very much for what you're doing. You're making an impact. I love the podcast. Keep it up. And so thank you.
Honor to have you, brother. One thing, Derek and Tommy, you'll appreciate this. One thing I always respected and appreciated about you is you're a great leader. Obviously, you did the job, and we all can identify the people who didn't because a lot of posers in our former profession. But what always blew my mind is you have a ton of experience, but your enthusiasm is like that of a guy who just came out of the fucking academy. And that is absolutely something that is not replicated. And one of the things that I really, it just blows my mind, which is why I like hanging out with you so much. We got to get the brides together soon. But thanks for coming on, man. You were a great guest. And man, I learned a ton. And we talk all the time, and I still learned a ton. So I hope our listeners did as well. So Tommy?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Great comments. Yeah, I don't know that we're ever going to match the energy for any episode in the very long future, actually, not even the short-term future, because I don't know that there's anyone more passionate. Derek, you and I met once at Pete's retirement party. We talked on the phone once, a couple of times. You know, we have a lot of mutual friends. Your energy is infectious, and it stimulates conversation. Even as a cop in my home, how ignorant I am of the grand scheme of what's going on. So thank you for that. I brought awareness into my family. It trickles down to my children, young adults, my nephews, my nieces. I have been anointed as the person who speaks to them about pornography, about drugs, about all of this stuff. So, you know, I know these are difficult conversations at home, and I am much more articulate and much more aware, even though I'm not even close to what you are, to be able to try to save the children in our home and in our extended family. So thank you for that. Again, I think you're saving hundreds of thousands of lives. However, the goal here, the bar is, can we at least have a conversation and save one life? And then we'll move from there, you know. But I think your effort is hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. So thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And that's kind of how I looked at it. Like, if you save one life and one family can put their kid to bed and see the kid off to school, then it's a success. And you know, hopefully, trying to be optimistic. I think we're on the right path. We already have seen like a decrease in fentanyl seizures. The cartels are starting to wake up because they're realizing that President Trump's not going to tolerate them killing Americans. So I guess they're afraid of the very, very sophisticated technology that may come their way if they don't stop this madness. So we're starting to see, unfortunately, like more methamphetamine, more cocaine, but hopefully the deaths will continue to drop. Hopefully we'll get CDC to start putting together some accurate numbers so we can start assessing the magnitude of the threat. And hopefully the administration can get more support and cooperation from China, because they're really, you know, they're the ones behind the scenes, you know, doing all the madness. So thank you guys and have a good night.
Love you both, man. Go eat, Derek.
Okay,
Thank you.
so thanks, Derek. You can hang on. If you want to connect with us at Finest Unfiltered on YouTube, X is at Ten-Four Tavern. Pete and I, and Derek included, are pretty prominent on LinkedIn. That's our platform of choice, right, Pete? I don't speak for you, but and then at Ten-Four Tavern on Instagram. We're trying to build this up. Again, our vibe is law enforcement, public safety, military veterans, talking about some old stories, good times, good capers, and then also bringing awareness to what's currently going on in the industry, in the military, in public safety, because at the end of the day, without national safety and security in our country, in our homeland, from the grassroots in the neighborhoods to our 48 states, our Alaska, our Hawaii, if we're not safe here, we're not safe anywhere. And that's the conversations that we're going to talk about while imbibing responsibly over a cocktail with some ladies and gentlemen that have done the job and that are in the know. And then also, I want to reiterate responsible drinking. If you overserve yourself, grab an Uber, grab a Lyft, grab a phone. I doubt in today's day and age, anyone will turn you down for a ride home. Do not get in a car. Do not do that. And again, the podcast has shown itself to elevate officer wellness. We'll be doing more on officer wellness coming up. Pete's got a lot of contacts that are coming in. They're reaching out. They want to get on the podcast. We're going to try and filter them in. We'll probably do some add-on conversations, and outside of our Tuesday 7:05 slot, we'll do some add-ons as the schedule fits to do officer wellness, suicide prevention conversations. We'll promote some fundraisers and some awareness capers with that. So again, last time, Derek, any final thoughts? Pete, any final thoughts? And we'll wrap it up.
Thank you very much. I got to eat because I obviously enjoyed the conversation, but now it's 9 o'clock. So have a good night.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Take care.
Yo.
Last call. We're out.